Condoleezza Rice has excelled at all the roles she's played in her life, from being the first black American woman to serve as a U.S. Secretary of State, to a political scientist, to concert pianist. She grew up in the racially charged city of Birmingham, Alabama, and she gives major credit to her parents in her memoir, Extraordinary, Ordinary People. And Condoleezza Rice is with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I asked you first, should it be Secretary, Madam Secretary, or Dr. Rice? And you said?
Condi, please.
Do people actually call you
Unless
that?
you want to brave Condoleezza, that's okay, too.
Well, I can do it. All right. Well, Dr. Rice, thanks very much for being here. This is such a personal story. This is not about foreign policy. This is not about the serving in the Bush White House. This is really about your personal story of growth as a child, growing up in the oh-so-segregated South. It was a separate kind of growing up, wasn't it? Describe that.
Well, Birmingham really had two parallel societies. On the one hand, you had the white world, and then you had the black world. And the twains didn't meet very often. My parents were part of a middle-class black community that believed in faith and family and education. But of course, they were quite ordinary people, a school teacher, minister, and high school guidance counselor. But the circumstances to teach a little girl that you might not be able to have a hamburger at a Woolworth's lunch counter, because you couldn't under segregation.
Right.
But you could be president of the United States if you wanted to be, and that was really the way that they raised me. What a dichotomy.
You talk about getting in the car and going on trips and traveling from the Deep South and hoping to not have to stop at a gas station.
That's right, because restrooms were segregated. And, of course, the restrooms for coloreds, as they were called at the time, were pretty awful.
Yeah. And your mother wouldn't go?
And my mother wouldn't go. My mother simply wouldn't go into them.
Yeah. There is that part of the story. Then there's also part of the story that you were this only child. Yes. And you were doted on something fierce.
I was doted on something fierce. I had wonderful parents who loved me unconditionally and gave me really every opportunity that they could even remotely call an educational opportunity. But it was really the ethic in my community more broadly. My parents' friends also believed in the strength of educational values and preparation and frankly being twice as good so that you could show the white man that you were capable.
Underline that again. I mean, it trips off the tongue, but think about that. Living in a world where you had to be twice as good if you were going to be given any actual consideration at all.
That's right. And if you were going to have a productive life, and if you were going to control your circumstances, my parents believed that you might not be able to control the circumstances, but you could certainly control your response to them. And education was a kind of armor. Preparation was a kind of armor that allowed you to do that. Right. And so if you had to be twice as good, so be it. And it wasn't a matter of debate, by the way. It was just sort of said that way.
I know. It's interesting because there are a bunch of different things. I mean, they gave you every lesson under the sun. They let you watch as much TV as you wanted, which is another part of the story which I love so much. But they also made you earn some things. You had a little tiny sort of organ in your house, and there was a song. Can we just listen to this song a second? Why is this song so important?
That song is What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And my father told me, when you can play What a Friend We Have in Jesus perfectly, we'll buy you a piano. Because I had asked for one because the little organ didn't have enough keys. And so I went to my grandmother's house that next day, and for 8 hours I practiced and I practiced. And my grandmother said I wouldn't even get up for lunch. And when my parents came home to pick me up, I knew What a Friend We Have in Jesus perfectly. And my poor parents, who didn't have the money to go out and buy a piano, went out, I think, on one of those rent-to-own things, and they rented a piano so that they wouldn't disappoint me.
There are extraordinary stories in this book, including how your father became a Republican, and because the Democrats couldn't register him, because a black man couldn't be registered to vote in the South in that day and age. But Stokely Carmichael came over for dinner.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember the Black Panthers?
My father really was sort of attracted to radical black politics, despite the fact that he was a quite conservative man himself, Republican all of his life. But he really, I think, was attracted to the way that they confronted racism, not with humility and sublimation, but really with strength. And so I did have a lot of associations that, in retrospect, would perhaps be viewed a little strangely.
How's your golf game?
My golf game's coming along. Working on my short game and looking forward to playing with you here.
One of these days. It's a terrific read, and the next book is supposed to be about...
It'll be about foreign policy, but this says where I came from, and that was important to me.
It's quite a story. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The book is called Extraordinary Ordinary People.